Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's somewhere between afternoon and evening, and I wish we could coin a word for that. Prava, should we say after evening, or before evening? Yes, pre-evening.
Twilight.
Yeah. So, good pre-evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have with us Prava Rai, and she's going to speak about Sikkim. Her presentation is largely centered around this issue of Mark that she has edited. And she is a member of the Goa Writers Group. She shares a time between Goa and Sikkim. She has edited a lovely journal in the past called Permal from based in Goa, which brought together a lot of varied cultural content in one nice quarterly publication, I think it was. Annual, it was an annual publication. Permal, they are all collector's items now, edited by Prava Rai. So, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Prava.
I'm here alone in splendid isolation, but I have 15 minutes to speak about a very, very important project that I did for Mark in 2014, and actually, I worked on it for about 2-3 years. When they asked me to guest edit a journal, an issue of Mark on Sikkim, they also asked me to look for a theme around which I can build this issue. So, one of the themes that we have in Sikkim, as everywhere, is this movement of people, migration, and settling down in different places and readjusting and creating your own identities and cultures. So I call this, the theme is migration, the reinvention of identities and cultures in Sikkim. Now Sikkim is a was a kingdom and became part of India in 1975. I don't want to go into the political history of how this happened. I just wanted to, in this issue, talk about how different waves of migrations from, even Neolithic time, when it was considered a corridor through which certain skills, like character making, was traveled into South Asia through Sikkim. And we find in prehistoric times evidence of this in terms of Neolithic tools, which in Sikkim they thought was, a thunderstone sent down by the gods. A digital archaeologists found out that this is something else, and it led to a prehistoric time in which that geographical space was used as a corridor for migration. And so, as in all places, and we see in different conversations, we talk about people, who was here first, who was the original inhabitants of this place, and who does it belong to. And in that sense, for me personally, I feel movement of people is a natural thing. People move from place to place for various reasons and make strange places their homes. We were listening to the Kurdi band who talked about their links with Crete. And we have in Sikkim identified people coming from the west, from the Rai areas, from Tibetan corridor through those high passes, and making it their home. And some people who claim that they were there before everything. So, and to claim that they have, wonderful vocabulary they have created, or devised to name everything, like the lecturers who claim they are the indigenous people, their gods are the mountains, the stones that they worship, the rivers that they worship, and truly they have an extraordinary vocabulary to name everything, flora, fauna, stones, rivers, everything. And as though by doing that they've claimed this space as their own. And then we have, in the 13th century, later on, we have people from Tibet coming into that, mainly as herders, and traders, and they made it their home. They were more robust, more aggressive, and by 16th, 17th century, they had installed their own king. I don't want to go back into the history of how it happened, the internal politics, monastic politics in Tibet, and led to the ouster of certain group of lamas who had to, who were ousted and were looking for different places where they could have conversion and spread their own religion. So we have the lepchas and we have the Tibetan descendants who are called Lopas, or people from the south in Tibetan. And then we have a controversial claim by a group of people called Limbus, who say they were there before, or the Kirapis. Now, there are two reasons. One reason is that the borders, the political borders of this area changed, and people drew lines later on. Before the borders were porous, people moved freely from one place to another according to the seasons, according to the needs, for grazing, for trade, for whatever. But once in the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, the borders were more frozen, and people who were actually part of this natural area of inhabitants were suddenly considered outsiders, foreigners. So we have that kind of anguish also, because no, we belong here, our ancestors were here, but you're not. And then we had in Nepal, the area of Nepal was before Prithvi Narayan Shah came, was little inhabited by different tribes with their own chieftains. And when Prithvi Narayan Shah unified Nepal, which was actually suppressing the indigenous people and putting working on imposing their own power and their own definition of who are you and what are you. They suppress language, they suppress religion, etc. So in Sikkim, we have these people who are considered Nepalis who came in. There were people from Tibet who came in as Lopas, and there were, of course, the lepchas, who also spread. The lepchas is spread across northern West Bengal, east in western Bhutan, going from Sikkim into Nepal. So the indigenous lepcha people have a large tract of their own land, but Sikkim somehow has become their land. It is their land, and they're given the respect. So we have. In this issue, I decided maybe to explore how people have lived together, how they have adjusted to each other. So I tried to get different contributors to write different aspects. There's one written by Annabelle. She's a social anthropologist, and she was talking about the lamas and the shamans. And she found that she writes about it at the ground level, at social level, at organic people adjust to each other. They stand up, and it is very beautiful the way she puts it. You have the shamans, the priests, who are from one community. The Jhankris are from the Limbu community, then you have the Nejun from the Bhutia community, then you have the Romting from the Lepcha community. And if they live together, they establish relationships, both initially as economic relationships, and then socially they're married to each other. And when the times of crisis, if in a Nepali or in a Limbu household, they don't have the Jhankri, Lopa priest will come and stand up, stand in for that and do the propitiating rites or whatever for them, and across the board. So at that level, you can see people are one. They see threats outside as as equal people, that any one of them can fight the ward off evil. And that I found quite moving. I know when I was growing up, when I was very ill once, my mother called a Jhanti and learned some prayers and all that. I got well, actually. And so we have that at societal, organic level, and then we have what we call state-sponsored, looking at reinventing identities and cultures. So we have the lecture community, which is a very large community, large in a sense, spread over some geographical area, and they're not all Buddhist. Some of them they were initially, and some of them still are animists, and Buddhist with regard to the migrant people's religion, and then there are some Christians. And here the state is trying to create a specific tradition for them. And there were some problems, even within the lecture community. They had, on one hand, each little village has its own very specific geographical area, very specific gods and demons. So when they have a particular festival or religious festival, they actually invoke their particular gods and demons. And when they had this united lecture, Lorum Fat, they call it, a very important festival for the lectures now, they had these spiritual or priests coming from different parts, and they were together and they were looking at each other, didn't know which god or which demon to exercise and god to meet. So those are, and of course you have the Christians who have rejected this. So that is another article in which this social anthropology Jenny Beckley talks about, and what it means today's politics, as block votes, as people uniting together to get the most of the privileges that are assigned to tribals. But one of the most important, interesting article here is about Newars, a particular community, very highly cultured, highly talented people who occupied, who came from the valley, Kathmandu Valley. In late 19th, early 20th century, they migrated eastwards, and they did something really fascinating, I think. In a diasporic situation, they did away with their castes. They said, we call ourselves Pradhanas. We are not going to call ourselves caste names. So I found that very interesting, how they're adjusting to a new geography, new place, new culture. And there is a priest now, a Newari priest, who doesn't come from a priestly caste. And he has built this temple, that temple, which he incorporates all the ideas of different religions. You have Mother Mary there, you have Sai Baba there, there is Buddhist, Hindus, all this, and everybody goes there to worship. And he mixes tantric practices with Hindu rites, something that would be unheard of in Nepal. So here again I found how he invented rituals which would appeal to everyone, and people from all religions go there. So this is one. And then of course we had one, because it was marked, so you had specific, you have perspective, you have different sections. So in one of the articles is on the changing garments of a particular community, the Bhutias, how it, what it was before and how it evolved through the time. And there too, apart from using different material now, before they had yak hides, rough wool, all that, now of course they use yarn, fabric made in factories, etc. And here too, because Sikkim is no longer a feudal state, there is a leveling of classes, and the garments which were usually worn by the upper class Bhutias, the king's clan, are now worn by everyone, whoever can earn enough money. So you can't make any distinction now. So there is that leveling off also. And another article here which I found interesting was how in a village there were 12 mandals got together and built a temple, a monastery, and they continued. So in this issue, what I found was how in reality people find ways of existing and creating their own identities, their own cultures in different places. And I hope you'll have time to look at this, and I thought it was important enough issue.
What is Sikkim's staple food? I mean, what goes into making
Sikkim food? We eat rice, and it's of course the cuisine has changed over time also. We have maize, potatoes, and we make rice, dal, and our food habits of course influenced by Bengal right next door, Nepal, and we eat grasses, and we have food from the forests. Yeah.
So what is the staple diet for?
Normally we eat, what is the most popular thing, what we call momos, these dumplings, and soups because it's cold in certain parts. So that's what we eat. But it's rice and dal, etc. Yeah.
I was in Sikkim and I was very much impressed by the people, the government and their work and the people unity and all. But I was very much astonished to see that the mountains, their hills are just breaking down, and it was very difficult for us to go through those roads, and it is very dangerous also. Do you think that government is doing something in that? Because they say that they dig the mountains for making buildings and all. So why don't you be a little strict on that way? Another thing I find that most of the hotels on the corner of the hills there, and it is very dangerous also. Sometimes we can hear something like the Kashmir. So I think it is a very, very alarming thing.
Yeah, it is. Sikkim is on that very dangerous, vulnerable, seismic, belt, and our mountains are very young, and plates haven't settled yet. And I do object to a lot of things that the government is doing in terms of development, in terms of the Tista Dam, for example, and the tunneling that goes on. And a lot of us are very unhappy about that. In terms of the hotels being on ridges, we have very little flat land, you might have noticed. And the government, the water road, people are supposed to keep the main highways clean, but our terrain is against us.
The thing is that Sikkim is such a beautiful land that we will be very upset if something happens. So we want it to, the government should take care of it.
Well, Prava, apart from geographical features, what is it that is strikingly different from Goa?
Since you have been to both places.
Apart from the physical features.
Apart from physical features, about Goa, what is it that is strikingly different from Sikkim is different from Goa?
Well, I suppose the striking thing is, as you said, is I think we are a more protected society. In terms of, we have ruled under the 371 F, the special provision that we have, which prevents people from outside buying land. And even, people like me who married outside, now they allow me to buy property, but they say my children cannot inherit that property. So that is something quite striking. In that sense, Goa is, and people in Goa do feel alarmed, and that is one thing. We are very protected.
There is a kind of unfolding narrative, say, in the Northeast, in different parts of the Northeast, about how India views the Northeast and how the Northeast views India. What would be the counterpart in Sikkim, both in terms of how they see themselves vis-a-vis the Northeast and India?
Well, you know, geographically we're a little distant from the Northeast, you know, that chicken neck divides us. And we actually naturally belong to Nepal and Bhutan. We were the three kingdoms. That was a buffer zone between India and China. We don't really belong to the Northeast in that sense. But for the sake of economic reasons and political reasons, Sikkim has sought to be included in part of the Seven Sisters, now the eighth sister. Yeah. And in terms of
Perceptions.
well, you know, there are people, everybody has their own views, but there is a growing sense because of what's been happening in different parts of the country against the people from the Northeast. And there's a lot of young people from racism and discrimination. There's sort of typology, you know, about people from there. Or every time you come here, there's a, which country are you from? You know, mainland India doesn't view us as part of India. So we resent that. I mean, I have had encounters where I've been pretty sharp. I said, first you force us to become Indians, and then now you ask me which country I'm from. You know, and a lot of us feel that we alienated from the mainland Indians, and we still say, going to India.
Thank you, Prava.